Do you know how in just a month, a strong and successful young man can turn into a nervous and thin paranoid? No. And I'll tell you. It all started last month with another seemingly harmless trend in one of the social networks. The essence of it was that it was necessary to call the apartment's intercom or the apartment itself and by any means try to either enter the entrance or simply lure the owner of the apartment to the forest cage under the scope of the camera. Will you say that it's not funny? I agree with you, but a huge number of children find it funny and are happy to repeat such trends. I don't live in the biggest city, so all the new products reach us with a delay of a couple of months, so for sure. However, unfortunately, this time the internet has promoted this trend too quickly, as a result of which it has reached us. Oh, what then began in the city? For the whole city there were about 10 high-rise buildings where there were intercoms, respectively. All the children of the city called these high-rise buildings almost around the clock, from which the owners took off the intercoms and hid them far away. The first problems began about a month later when, as an election campaign, the candidate for mayor installed intercoms in all apartment buildings over 2 floors. Then the GOP companies became interested in the new trend, which now had their way cut off to the entrances, where they mostly gathered. Some particularly enterprising fellows even lured the owners out of the apartments, jammed and robbed. Soon, law enforcement agencies became interested in all this, and in the shortest possible time, namely, as soon as they attracted several jokers, all the pranks stopped. It would seem that everything, happy end, can be celebrated and drink champagne, but no, not everything was so simple. A rumor went around the city that someone was ringing the intercom at night so persistently, and if you don't let them in, then he starts singing songs under the windows, so much so that a person almost goes crazy. The neighbors really don't hear anything, but each victim claims that there were songs. Those who let the night guest into the entrance were met with a terrible fate. People were found dead near the open doors, their faces were distorted with a grimace of horror, and their bodies were covered with ulcers, as if from burns. Naturally, for the most part people were skeptical about this bike. Well, they say, what kind of night singer is a maniac walking around the city? Nonsense. Yes, but there were more and more rumors. Then a friend heard it, then a neighbor's brother died on the train. In general, all the information that reached was passed through several people, and accordingly, it didn't look like the truth. Something similar to the childhood game of Soviet children, name me a broken phone. I was also among those who were extremely skeptical, but everything changed literally one night. It was a very ordinary day. I returned from work, and after dinner I was getting ready to go to bed, when suddenly my intercom rang. Here we need to make a small digression and explain the design feature of our house. I lived in a 4-story house built in the revolutionary years, and due to the fact that the house was plastered with cornices, facades, etc., the tenants could not see the entrance to the entrance. Therefore, the management company installed additional equipment for us for free, namely a video intercom. An extremely useful thing, so as not to let any punks and hoodlums into the entrance. So, I come up to the intercom screen, but there is no one on the camera, it's empty. It should be noted here that the camera has a very large viewing angle, so no one could stand somewhere to the left or right. Having written everything off to the next stupid jokes of the kids, I calmly went on about my business, when suddenly, after about 15 minutes, the doorbell rang again. This time I almost ran to the screen, but it was empty. Mentally cursing the jokers, I remained standing at the screen, hoping to catch the night hooligans in sight. But to my surprise, they seemed to feel that I was standing at the screen because the calls stopped abruptly, or maybe they were just tired. Why did I think there were several of them? Yes, the devil knows, it is unlikely that someone would walk alone at night and ring the intercoms. Hoping that the jokers had finally calmed down, I went towards the bed with a calm soul, but as soon as I touched my head to the pillow, the doorbell rang again. Starting to boil slowly, I reached the intercom in a few jumps and glanced at the screen, expecting to see emptiness there. However, this time there was no image at all. The screen was black, as if someone had closed the camera. These freaks, they thought of closing the camera with something, I thought, and freaked out and picked up the phone. Perhaps I used my entire vocabulary to explain to the jokers that it was wrong and not accepted to call at night, and that I was very dissatisfied with their actions. When I finished my monologue, there was silence for 15 seconds, and then a voice sounded in the speakers. Let me in cursing, I sent the speaker to hell and dropped the call. However, it is unclear who was persistent and apparently had a goal to get through to me at any cost, because the calls continued for about 5 minutes, and when I took the call again, a voice was heard in the speakers repeating the same phrase. Let me in. It seemed that even the intonation did not change, it was just as indifferent and monotonous. And so, as soon as I had to drop the phone, there was a strong bang downstairs, echoing loudly in the darkness of the night. Judging by the sound, someone slammed on the door with all the dope. And about 40 seconds later, the night darkness and calmness were cut through by some kind of mournful howling that was heard under my window. Of course, I remembered the urban horror story for a while, but the sound coming from the street was very difficult to call singing, as if someone was driving a fork on the glass, sometimes replacing it with foam. The strangest thing about this whole situation was not even that it smelled surreal, but that the sound seemed to come from everywhere. It doesn't matter if my window is closed or not, whether I go into the bathroom, holding my ears or putting on headphones at full volume, the nasty sound does not disappear anywhere and does not reduce the volume by a single bit. The sound seemed to be broadcast directly into my head. And even more surprising was that after a while, this creaking really began to remind me of singing, and I even began to distinguish the words, although they were pronounced in some unknown language to me. What I initially took for a creak was a very high and at the same time husky voice. And so I began to distinguish the unknown dialect more and more clearly. My hands began to shake, my body became worded. I did not understand the content, but there was so much sadness and pain in this song that, willy-nilly, tears came to my eyes. I understood with my head that contact with what was near the entrance did not bode well for me, but my heart was bursting out, giving impulsive orders for my hands to press the button to open the entrance door. In the end, I decided to resist as much as I could, biting myself and hitting my body, but there was no pain. I was like in a trance, and my brain was the last link connecting me with the normal world. Meanwhile, the song became louder and the words more jerky. Apparently the chorus began. My consciousness was completely clouded, and the sane part of me could only watch as my body approached the intercom, stretched out its hand, and pressed the door opening button with a trembling finger. The sound of the door opening and then slamming is heard below, and the mood of the song becomes even more tragic. A few more minutes pass, during which I break down like the last drug addict. Now a new order has been given to the body, it must open the front door. Having found the strength, I tried to resist again and managed to regain control of my body for a short time. I decided to block my access to the landing. Grabbing the keys from the bedside table, I inserted them into the keyhole, turned them and, leaning with all my weight, broke off first in one then in the other lock, because the inner one, which I usually closed the door with, could not be blocked. Someone or something apparently heard the fuss, and the song gained momentum again, and I finally lost control of my body, which immediately reached out to unlock the door. Having opened the internal lock, I tried to pull the handle, but the door, closed for 2 more locks, of course did not give in. Turning the keys in my hands, my body threw them away and began trying to claw the broken parts of the keys out of the lock with my nails. There was no pain at the moment when the pads of the fingers were torn against the iron pad of the lock, nor at the moment when the nails came off. Even the fear as such was no longer there. My consciousness just looked at all this, not capable of emotions. Finally, apparently realizing that the door would not open, my body clung to the peephole, and that's when I saw it. There was something behind my door. Long greenish limbs rested against the walls, floor and ceiling. There were about 6 or 8 limbs, almost like a spider. However, the creature's body had nothing to do with arachnids. Greenish, covered with some spots and depressions, almost oval in shape, the head was moving away from it. Yes, it was the head, and it probably once belonged to a young girl, although now it did not look the best. Half of the face had peeled off, exposing rotting flesh, one eye was missing, and the teeth were a palisade of sharp needles, giving off yellowness. The hair was tangled in a large lump. This something did not have hands as such, but somewhere in the middle of the oval body, there were 2 smaller processes that ended in long spikes, slightly curved inwards. It's hard to say why, but I immediately came up with the idea that there is something very ancient in front of me, something older than the first chronicles, something that should not be in the modern world. Kikimora surfaced somewhere in the mind. But the second thought was that there are no swamps near my house. Apparently, a dialogue with myself was growing inside my shocked consciousness, or maybe I was just going crazy. And what if this something got hungry and went hunting? But why now? Why here? Why exactly in this way? There were significantly more questions than answers, so my consciousness simply faded away again. The creature was singing all the time, increasing the power in its voice, if you could call it that. Now my body apparently had a new order, because it started hammering at the door with all its might with its hands and feet, until something cracked in the brush. Then my body moved to the end of the corridor, and, accelerating, crashed into the door. Again there was an unpleasant crunch, this time somewhere in the ribs. But there was no pain, and the body continued to crash into the door. There was a hiss of anger and discontent from behind the door itself, and then a sharp spike pierced it, opening the thick metal like a can opener. The singing stopped, and I regained control of my body, and with it the pain. It was terrible, the pain of broken bones and joints, torn nails and, as it turned out, a broken head fell on me overnight. There was so much pain that consciousness went out again, only now it is no longer from the chanting. Well, in the meantime, the creature has already ripped open half of the door, apparently intending to get inside. Another minute, and a significant part of the door trim fell inside the apartment. This creature got into the apartment together with the creature. The smell of decay and decomposition, mixed with mustiness, crept into the apartment. The creature grinned rather and slowly approached me, moving its limbs over all surfaces. Now it has already approached me. And with a kind of inappropriate irony, I thought that for the first time the city rumor turned out to be so true. Then the creature opened its mouth, a long tongue like a tentacle with a single sucker at the end came out. This tentacle reached out to my stomach and leaning against it burned it with pain, but then the creature abruptly pulled it back and bounced away from me, disappeared into the entrance. There were quick retreating slaps on the stairs. The creature ran away. And now I'm lying next to the carved door all alone, realizing that I'm about to die from my injuries. My gaze slides along the wall and bumps into the clock. It shows 4:33 and dawn is dawning outside the window. Apparently this damned evil is afraid of sunlight. A thought flashed through my fading consciousness. I came to myself in the hospital. I was discovered by a neighbor when I went out for a walk in the morning with my dog. The doctors fought for my life for 3 days, and in the end they still managed to save me. Thank God I'm alive and well. No one believes my testimony. They come up with a variety of versions, from mental disorder to robbery. Well, I know the truth. I know the whole truth, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid this thing will come back for me and finish what it started. In this case, I have a thick wooden pencil by my bed. I will simply deprive myself of hearing and pierce my ears, but I will stay alive.